It's about creating conversations because it leads to other conversations. Arrow.net, ARROE.net. We are unplugged and totally uncut with Riley Redgate.
Hi, I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
Very well, very well. Your book is coming out at one of the greatest times because in reality, I realize that your book is set in 2072 and it talks about volcanoes and things like that. But to a young adult reader these days, my God, this book fits right into what we're facing during these chapters.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear you say that. Yeah, it does definitely feel even a little bit more zeitgeisty than I originally intended it to be. What with the current, political conflicts out there and everything.
Was it something that you were feeling in the moment? Because I'm also a writer, and I take from the universe. Yeah. I bring the universe forward. Is it the same thing for you?
Mm. Yeah, I think there's definitely a sense in which, the book is not specifically about climate change because the idea is that a single cataclysmic event, this single volcanic eruption, will trigger massive methane release that causes the Earth to be uninhabitable. So in that way, that's an external force, whereas climate change is anthropogenic, and of course we're generating it ourselves, and it's a slower process. So it's not outright about climate change per se, but I think there are a lot of feelings that I have toward climate change that I'm putting into the book, where kind of there's a sensation of helplessness that the characters have toward what is happening, and I think that is something that unfortunately a lot of people are struggling with right now, this feeling that, we should be doing something, we can't do anything, we should be acting, we should be, even if we change our behaviors, how are we supposed to transform, for instance, policy? We have this awareness that things are going wrong, we have this dread that things are going wrong, and yet we feel extremely powerless to change it, and that we're kind of barreling towards something that we can't avoid. That's sort of the feeling that I was definitely channeling through a lot of this project.
Well, I love where you put your focus, because the world is set to end. Leigh Chen is part of a small group of children with their parents are world leaders. I mean, wow, we never get to see that side of the story.
Yeah, it's I definitely wanted to have I think that feeling of powerlessness that I'm trying to evoke is maybe a little bit more stark if the characters are only kind of 1 degree removed from power. So they are the children of these change makers on Earth, and yet if they can't make change happen, then who can? And then also they're kind of trapped together trying to build a new society on this spaceship, and then even then, when they are self-governing, like a small group, we see kind of the same ripple effects and the same prejudices and the same barriers start to kind of erupt between them, and they begin to perpetuate some of the same things that we saw happening on this future Earth, some of the same conflicts. So, yeah, it's I didn't want to make these kids, a 100% stand-in or proxy for either their powerful parents or the nations that they come from, because they are an international cast. But there's definitely an element there where they will feel representative of their backgrounds and the places where they come from.
Where were you at when this one thought came into your mind? And the question is, what do you stand for when you're one of the last standing? My God, that is such a powerful statement.
Thanks. That's definitely kind of the central moral question of the book is, will the main character be able to find her own morality? I think where she is coming from as a child of the president is this kind of hyper-publicized, media-forward life, and she feels very nervous all the time about either misrepresenting herself or saying something wrong or doing something bad that will then be preserved forever, which I think is a very kind of internet-y feeling. But so kind of to that end, she has learned to kind of scrub away all trace of her taking stances on things or having opinions on things, because if you have an opinion, then that means that there are people who can disagree with you and thereby, kind of become your enemy. And so she has been living her life on damage control mode. But then once this eruption happens and she's thrust into kind of a position of power, it's no longer adequate at that point for her to kind of go with the flow and just be the consummate politician and diplomat and have no thoughts or feelings of her own. That's the point at which it begins to matter what she stands for. So that's kind of where that question comes from, narratively speaking.
You have a name inside your book, and I would love to know the reason why you may have used it. I wonder if we're on the same page here. You use the name Lazarus. Now, Lazarus in my life is a very powerful figure in the Bible. Is it what? Yeah. Were you inspired by that?
Yeah, that wasn't a that name came kind of late in the process. I was trying to find like an appropriately weighty name for the ship, one that would kind of evoke the feelings of solemnity that I kind of wanted. So I was going through, I had some ideas about drawing from either Greek myth or Egyptian myth, a name that would evoke, feelings in folks. The Lazarus, I think, was an appealing name for me because of this sense of resurrection and rebirth, and the idea that it's a second chance, and at least it's supposed to be a second chance. So kind of contrasting that with like the events of the ship and what what they go through. Yeah, that's meant to kind of echo off of it in certain ways, yeah.
Well, it's such a powerful name, and it really does. It really gives that ship an opportunity to have a lot of history behind it. And if people would take the time to do a little bit of research, they'll really connect with what this story goes even deeper than just the paragraphs.
Thank you. Yeah. I think I was actually brainstorming with a friend for that name as well, the friend to whom I dedicated the book, Leanne. So I'll have to mention to him that it's connected with you. I love that. Yeah.
You aren't afraid to step into a pool of grief and trauma. I mean, you really bring it out there in the way of, going out there and, if you were writing music, you would be creating song hooks. Well, you've got reading hooks inside this book.
Thank you. It's definitely it's a tough subject. I think, post-apocalyptic fiction is interesting because it does deal with the loss of everything and everyone you've ever known, generally, which is almost like a grief too large to encapsulate sometimes. It kind of feels like it has to sort of exist in the background for the characters to be active at all. But yeah, these are a group of traumatized kids who are trying to process the fact that they have survived and no one else will. And they have to prepare themselves on this ship to kind of take over leadership of the ship. They don't have any trained crew members or astronauts or anything. So they are struggling to form something close to a functional ship's crew, but at the same time, they are having private breakdowns. They're struggling with their own personal losses. And it was not to make the book sound too cheerful and uplifting, but yeah, that was definitely a central concern.
Don't you see that though as a teaching tool in the way that because I work on the front line and I talk with a lot of the young adults and things like that, and I do ask them about the current situation of the world, and as of late they've been going, well, we don't think about it, but yet in your book they do think about it and they do come together, and I see this as a teaching tool of saying to the young adult readers, hey, look, you still have a voice, use it.
Yeah, I would hope that would be, something that the younger generation would feel, and I do think I think there's a balance to be struck where you've got to separate yourself enough from the countless things that are going wrong in the universe in order to not be crushed by them and to feel as if you can act and have some agency in your life, which is difficult to maintain that separation. But then you've also got to remain engaged enough and care enough and recognize that, you are a person who has agency and can make choices for yourself to be able to go out and try and make the world a better place, even if that seems difficult or unachievable.
Are we going to see more science fiction from you?
I have some science fiction ideas whirling around. I'm a genre omnivore. I love reading everything. I love writing everything.
Yep.
A couple of the projects I'm working on right now are high fantasy and dark fantasy, so that might be my next journey. I would like to do that. But yeah, there's definitely some more science fiction in my chaotic iPhone note that says story ideas. So we'll see.
So are you a daily writer in the way of journaling? Because the way you write, it feels like you're speaking directly to me. And that's one of the things that we learn in radio is that learn how to speak with the listener.
That's interesting. I don't actually journal. I have never journaled. I think I have tried a couple of times. Mm-hmm. I think I'm honestly a little bit uncomfortable with kind of purely confessional first-person writing. Just from my perspective, I think I actually need to take on like the barrier of fiction in order to explore a lot of ideas that I have or feelings that I have. Which is not to say that like I view fiction purely as a vessel for my own thoughts and feelings. But yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I like the idea that the book would be approachable to folks and would feel confessional in that way. Mm-hmm. Definitely this book, the main character, the narrator, she's a very earnest, serious person. She's like kind of a bleeding heart, and the kind of distance between that and the persona that she puts forward to other people of being this unflappable kind of blank slate personality is very great. So I really care about people connecting with her and feeling as if she's a fully formed and identifiable person. So it's great to hear you say that.
Wow. Riley, you've got to come back to this show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open for you.
Well, thank you so much.
Well, you be brilliant today, okay?
You too.